thanks for making time for us this morning. We wanted to talk to you about, we know this is the third year for the new state report card system, and I know that January was one part released, and then just a few days ago you had the other portion of the report card released. And I really liked your message to the community because you really take responsibility, hold the district accountable. Let's talk about the areas in the report card which are strong before we go into the ones that you mentioned that need some work.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on again. It's always good to.
So we always joke if we had a payroll, you'd be on it, right?
It's great to hear 70 degrees next week. I hope that's true.
Yeah, I hope so. My sinuses don't, but I do. I want to be outside.
So like you said, it's the third year of this new report card system. The state moved away from what used to be excellent with distinction, all of those classifications, to an A through F system. And in doing that, they further broke down the data that we get in the areas that we're graded in. So it used to be under the old system, some really general overlying areas that would be encompassed into that excellent with distinction or whatever your level was. Now they've really honed in and break down a number of different areas. So when we talk about where we're doing well, continue to do well, the number of indicators that we met. So the indicators are whether we have the what the state sets as their passing percentage of students that pass a certain test in a grade level. There was a number of indicators this year. Gifted was one. They had the Ohio graduation tests, which were on there. So we did very well in our indicators. We received an A. Our performance index is a B. Performance index is basically what they do is every student that takes a test, each test is weighted for what level the student achieves. So, for example, if you don't take the test, it counts as a 0. If you get limited, which is the lowest you can get, it's a 0.3. All the way up, I think the highest rating is like a 1.2 or something. And then every test that a kid takes gets calculated along that scale, and they come up with a total points that then is equated to this performance index score, which I think 120 is the highest you can get, and then they convert that to a letter grade. So we continue to do well in that area. On the performance index, though, that was one of the areas where students that had parents opt them out of testing last year, that was an area where that did impact us because those kids, I think we had 65 students, and it was a little over 100 tests that were recorded as zeros in that calculation. We did well on the annual measurable objectives, AMOs, which basically is showing if we're closing gaps on achievement within certain subgroups based off of a target percentage. We received a B in that area. That's another one that was impacted to some fashion by the opt-outs. And then graduation rate. We continue to do very well when it comes to our 4-year and 5-year. They do 2 calculations. One is kids that started in a 4-year cohort and graduated 4 years later. The other one looks at that same group but adds a year of 5-year. And so within both of those areas, we received an A. And then the other part that we've historically, I think this is the 3rd year now that they've done a career tech report card. But we continue to do very well on the career technical education report card. Our 4 Cities Compact is really a phenomenal program.
I was going to say, if you didn't get an A in that category, then there's something wrong with whoever measures these standards.
Yeah, so there's we have a lot to be proud of when it comes to where we're at with success as measured by the state.
And, of course, we have to ask the flip side of the question, which, you did mention in your email, I believe, that went out to parents. There are a couple of areas that need improvement. And I'm curious if you would share those, and I think you might have some sort of plan in place to start working on those areas.
Absolutely. So the areas on the report card that were lower, and some significantly lower. One of them was released back in January. That was the K-3 literacy piece. We talked about that at great length. Dr. Evans did at our February Board of Education meeting. K-3 literacy, what it's designed to do as a measure is look at students that basically start in kindergarten that are off track with the reading level that the state believes they should be at. So we give diagnostic tests in kindergarten, first and second grade at the beginning of each year that the state requires. We have a choice of which tests we use off of a state list, but we give those. And basically what's happening is they're trying to make sure by the end of third grade every child is on target with reading at the grade level, which is known as the third grade guarantee here in Ohio. And so with the K-3 literacy, they look at how many students started kindergarten as measured by that diagnostic test off track. And then the beginning of first grade, they look at how many of those same kids are now continuing to be off track. And they do that each year. Ultimately, where it ends up is third grade, when students take, for the first time, the state, what used to be the achievement test. Now, last year was the PARCC test, and now it's the English Language Arts AIR test is what we're using this year from the state. So we received a D. I think what's important to note with that measure is we're looking at a small group of students that are being tracked there. So it's not a holistic measure when it comes to all of the students that are progressing from kindergarten through third grade. It's that small off-target group. The other thing that's important to note is 100% of our third graders last year moved on to fourth grade. So by the time they're done with third grade, we have students that are moving on and are successful as measured by that third grade guarantee. Where we're focusing on that area though is we believe, and I think research would support it, and Dr. Evans had a nice graph she showed at our board meeting last month. The sooner that we can intervene and get those students that are off track help, the less likely it is that gap between where they should be and where they're at gets larger as they move on. And so, with that particular idea in mind, one of the things that we're doing next school year is the board has given approval for us to hire 3 additional teachers that we're going to be putting at the kindergarten and first grade levels to reduce class size. That's been an ongoing effort of ours. I think we've talked about that before when I was in here with our strategic plan. And so we should be able to drop our average class size in kindergarten somewhere around 4 or 5 students per section next year, which is significant when we talk about the number of little ones you have running around in a room that a teacher is responsible for. So we think that'll have a big impact. And then there's some other things that we're doing when it comes to strategies for interventions with the students as well. The other area that came out last Thursday that truthfully was surprising was this whole progress piece, they call it on the report card, which is based off of value-added data. And value-added is supposed to show whether a student's making a year's worth of growth. What was surprising about it is that last year there's 4 measures in there that a district gets rated on, and then an overall. One of those is an overall grade. We had an overall A last year and an A in gifted, and then a C in the lowest 20% of students and a C in special education. And this year we went to 4 Fs in each of those categories. So it was surprising to see, and digging a little further into it, and we're still trying to wrap our heads around the whole thing that's used behind the calculation. But from what I understand, in the past, it has been based off of a 3-year average over time is what we would get these grades on in value added. because of the change in testing that occurred last year with the PARCC exams, they weren't able to do a apples-to-apples comparison. So now they're looking at a one-year look with up to 5 data points for a student. So they're saying that it's not a fair comparison to take a look at where you were last year compared to where you are this year. But it just seems it's very surprising that a district, and we're not alone, there's a number of districts that have been high performing in that area that all of a sudden we're at the extreme other end. And so we're really looking at that. And I think a couple different things. We've been focusing on within our strategic plan and the efforts that we're doing for next year, services that we have for our gifted students. We offer services. The state, it's kind of interesting in the state of Ohio, they require you to identify students for gifted education, but they don't require districts to service students for gifted education. So there's not a lot of funding that follows gifted education. So what you have across the state are districts that range from no services to districts that have a plethora of services, and we're probably somewhere in the middle. And we've been looking to enhance that. 33% of our students here in Wadsworth are identified in one way or the other as gifted in an area. So it's been a focus of ours to enhance the services that we're offering. We've been working on that for a year. We have a group, I think it's 8 or 9 teachers and a couple administrators that are going through a program through the College of William and Mary right now, getting their gifted endorsement. And we have other things that we're looking to put in place next year in that area. So that's one of the areas. Special education and students that struggle academically that aren't identified, that's another area of concern for us that we've been focusing on even before the report card was released. We have an academic council in the district made up of teachers and administrators and some parents, board members, and over the last 2 years, last year we really looked hard at the gifted area. And this year we've been kind of looking at the other side, which are the students who struggle academically but are not identified with a disability. And so we're looking to beef up the amount of support that we have available for those students as well. So I think when we look at those value-added grades and that progress report card dimension, a lot of what we're seeing there is a reflection of those 2 areas. It's not exclusive, but those are areas that we definitely are working to improve.
Complete opposite ends of the spectrum
right.
that you have to, that you'll be working on, which I get most school districts do, but as you're focusing on one end, you have to completely shift and focus on the other. It seems like this is so complicated. The scoring system, my goodness.
And again, it's almost like some of the other, the EPA. It reminds me of the EPA unfunded mandates where you have to do this. We're not going to tell you how to do it. There's not any money available, but you're mandated to do it, and then it's kind of up to you. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we're getting graded or knocked down on something that,
I think what's I guess frustrating would be the word, and I want to be careful what I say here because, like I wrote in that letter. At the end of the day, everybody in the state, public school district-wise, is graded on the same thing. So whether we agree with it or disagree with it, whether we think it's fair or not fair, everybody's being measured on it. So we own our results. We're accountable for those. We know we have areas to improve. We've been working to improve on those even before the report card came out. But I think when you get into the frustration side of things, you have a state education system that's just constantly in flux. You have people responsible for developing policy at the state level that will sit in a room with a group of superintendents and tell us when we pass new laws, if you have the option to get a waiver to delay implementation, do it, because by the time the law fully kicks in, when waivers are no longer there, more than likely the law will have changed. And so when a district tries to get ahead of the curve and be proactive instead of reactive to what's occurring, a lot of times here in the recent past, it ends up being problematic for them. And so in regards to this whole report card, the test changed last year. We went through this whole phenomena with the park test, and there was an outcry over the whole Common Core standards. A lot of that was really focused and targeted on the testing aspect of it. The tests that were done took significant time last year. I think our high school alone reworked their schedule to a block schedule for probably almost close to a month of the school year, cumulative when you included the 2 different testing windows from February and April. So it was very disruptive. And then then they're trying to norm the scores and look at them nationally and come up with cut scores and all this other stuff. So we don't get results until now.
And then it changes again.
Right. And then in the meantime, while all of that's going on, while we're waiting to get these results, then the state changes their system. They throw out the parks. They're not going to fund those. So then the Department of Education's rushing to find a new method. Then we have the opt-out phenomena, which the state will publicize that they passed a law called Safe Harbor for school districts, for teachers and students, which is true. But for school districts, Safe Harbor means that we can't have any negative consequences from the standpoint of things like being put into academic emergency as a result of it. There's areas on the report card, like I mentioned earlier, that are directly impacted in a negative way by those opt-outs. And what I think is crazy about it is the state has no law that says, parents, you can't opt your kid out. But it almost as if it's thrown back at the district as it's your responsibility to make sure by tests. Well, if I don't have any ability to, at the end of the day, tell a parent, no, you have to have your kid test, why am I going to argue with people in my community? Why am I going to try to force them to do something that the law gives them permission to not do? It just doesn't make any sense. And then to turn around and hold the district responsible for that, it just doesn't seem like it's an accurate reflection of what they're trying to portray to the community when it comes to the report card. Report card should be an accurate reflection of how your students are doing.
What is, Dr. Hill, a reason that a parent can opt out of their children or child doing testing?
There's no
criteria
they have to give. Last year when we had the phenomena, and it really was isolated to last year, at least in my experience in the past, and so far moving forward, it really focused around the whole park and that being tied to the Common Core, but there's nothing that they had to specifically state that was the magic word to allow it to occur. It was just simply notification to the district. So we have that phenomena going on. Something else that has recently come out. Education Week, probably about 3 weeks ago, ran an article on the difference in park testing between those that did it on the computer and those who took the test paper and pencil. There's something called a mode effect in statistics, and from what I've read and understand, there's a way that park could have chosen to make sure that mode effect was negligible, so that there was no difference between those that took the test online and those that took it pencil paper. Park chose not to do that. There's at least 3 states, I think Illinois was one of those, that have done studies now on their students' results, and some of them have shown, I think on an average, like 16% difference. The students that took the test on the paper and pencil performed better than those that did online. I think I read that even within a district, one building was like 30% higher on the paper pencil. So there's been this push. I don't know if you've been following. Cleveland.com had a story yesterday. The Department of Education here in Ohio has so far refused to really look into the issue because they said park's done. It's not an issue. The issue is that we continue to test online. You know, the state had been pushing online testing for years. If I'm not mistaken, they actually had mandated it by a certain point. Like I talked about earlier with these things, districts get themselves ready, and then and it probably for good reason, some districts aren't ready for that, then they make changes in the law to allow for paper and pencil to continue. So, you know, we did a lot of our technology work to be able to get ready for that. And so last year we gave tests online exclusively, and we chose back in the summer when we had to make the choice for this school year to do it again. And so it's disturbing to see here in the last few weeks, and I've seen some examples, and I don't know that the examples I saw are 100% accurate or not, but last week they were circulating from practice test examples of a graph where on the paper pencil version, students got to select the choice of what the graph represented from A, B, C, or D. On the online version, it was a blank graph where they had to actually draw the graph itself. So if that type of thing is true, and that's the difference of what's going on between the two versions of the test, that doesn't seem like that would be a fair representation either. So, yeah, again, I don't want to come across as excuses. You know, we have work to do, we have work to improve, but I think it's important for our community to understand that when you look at this report card, there's factors in there that our district really doesn't have a lot of choices or influence on. And there's things in there that really may not be a representative, accurate representation of who we are as a school district. And I think that's an unfortunate thing. I think in my opinion, the further that they continue to do all of this stuff to the report card, I think the further it gets away from many people, including me, feeling that it's anywhere near an accurate reflection of a district. And I think at some point the report card itself is just going to lose. It's just going to lose any meaning and value with people because no one knows what to make of it. People understand A through F. You know, all of us have been through school. All of us know what those grades mean. I think it would be hard-pressed to find a lot of people in any community in Ohio that could sit there and tell you what each of those A through F letter grades actually reflect and mean, including me in the area of value added. I still can't sit here and tell you after a week of reading things over extensively and talking to the Department of Education, there's still questions I have that I don't fully grasp or understand in relation to how they calculate those scores and I know what it's supposed to be measuring, but I don't understand the inputs that are going into it to give what we ended up with.
Well, you know, it's interesting from like my standpoint, where you know I grew up with a paper and pencil type test and that kind of a thing, and even in to this day, if you know I need to take a test, whether it was for a licensing or this or that, you know, again a lot of it's online, and I still prefer more of a paper or handwritten test, much so along the lines even Tina and I talked. You know, I prefer reading a book as opposed to reading it online. I'm not equating that to being the same thing, but it would be tough for me to evaluate because I grew up that way, and maybe I'm used to it. So you know, like with the kids today that may not have taken a paper test, that may be more, you know, electronically, you know, how do you evaluate that? Because, you know, there's all the technology has changed over our life so drastically. You know, are we focused on something that's not, you know, again, it's tough to get a grasp of it.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, we had a lot of discussions because, you know, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that when a student's taking a math test or a reading test or a language test, that what's being measured is what the student knows in relation to the content they're testing. We want to make sure that that test is not reflecting students' lack of understanding with how to use technology equipment. And and I think that's what's been disappointing, as more is coming out on this whole park thing in relation to the technology. I think there's some underlying principles that we in many districts felt would be in place for fairness with that may, and I don't want to sit here and say they're definitely lacking, because I don't know that. But from what I've seen and what I've read, I think there's a good reason to question some of this stuff. And so, but I think at the end of the day, we are a good school district. We have a lot of opportunities that are here for our students because of the community support that we have. I've been around in 4 or 5 different school systems, whether they were Catholic or public, and I can tell you what I've seen here at Wadsworth is second to none. And so if I'm a community member looking at that and seeing that, here we've had a district that has performed so well for so many years on these state assessments, and all of a sudden we've had some drastic changes. I guess my message to that type of person would be, we know we have areas to improve upon. We're working on those. We should always be working on ways to improve, no matter how good we are. But I think it would be faulty to jump to the conclusion that somehow, with the same people in place, the same teachers, the same students, the same level of community support, that somehow within 1 year's time we've gone from being the highest to the lowest. It just doesn't add up.
Right.
But we'll own what's there. We'll take responsibility for it. We'll move forward.
Even though I think there are some things you shouldn't have to, let's say, and I haven't seen any of the park testing either way, but let's say that is accurate. I don't understand why a sort of standardized test would put some kids in a really bad position, but maybe have others excel. I don't get why the big difference.
I don't either. I was really surprised last week. It was Friday when I saw that circulating, these practice questions and the difference, and I thought, man, if this is really true, this is just not right on so many different levels.
Which goes to your point that if this would continue to happen, I mean, the report cards are going to be a thing that nobody even pays attention to in that regard.
The other thing is we have a data appeal that's going on. If you look closely at the report card that was released last week in the top left, you'll see this little tiny gray area that says that our progress scores are pending based off of some data appeal we have. I think that it's worded something like that. That's what they call, apparently, the watermark. We asked for a watermark to be placed because there is a data appeal. Now, in all fairness, our data appeal is, relatively speaking, with the number of kids in our district, it's over a very small, minor amount of scores that we're missing that they've told us that was an error, and they've granted our appeal. But that information, those scores weren't populated in time to be reflected in value added for the report card release. But there's a number of districts across the state that are in data appeal as well. And I think it just further compounds the issue of how accurate is what they're releasing. Why? I think there's many, if you read a lot of the articles across the state that have come out over the last week from different school districts and communities and editorials, I think there's many, including me, that question, why release stuff until you know that it's 100% accurate? And my guess is they're probably up against some statutory time frame of when things need to be released. But
can you imagine a journalist, though, reporting before all of the facts were known? I mean, that's the thing that gets you fired. That's the thing that gets you in serious trouble. It's better to be accurate above all else.
Yeah, and that's what's unfortunate. And accountability is good. I don't fault the state at all for wanting to hold school districts accountable. They should. We're public institutions that have people's most prized possession and that are being funded by by our community people. So we should be accountable. We should be transparent with everything that we're doing. But at the same time, when it comes to something like this, we should also make sure that what's being reported is 100% accurate.
When, like you said,
it's released.
And like you mentioned too, with there's the once you get to the third grade and there's that 100% graduation rate or whatever, and then when you look at the graduation rate, I understand it's 12 years later to the seniors. When you stand back, it's like, A doesn't equal B here. I mean, you look at some of these successes once the kids develop a little bit more, and that small snapshot may need to be addressed, but it can't be as accurate as the weight that they're giving it.
Yeah, that's true. And their plans in moving forward in the future, they're going to be weighting and grading areas. Overall, eventually there's going to be an overall grade a few years down the road with their plans if things don't change. So there's the prepared for success area that doesn't have a grade right now on the report card, that looks at things like advanced placement courses, college dual enrollment, or college credit plus now, those type of things. And while Wadsworth will continue to be strong in many of those areas, there's districts like where I came from in Waterloo that just don't have the funding to be able to offer those type of courses. In a year or two, they're going to start getting low grades on that area of the report card, and that's going to be a direct correlation to the amount of money that they have that they can put in what they can offer kids. And that just doesn't seem fair either. It's one thing, I guess, to report and show what the district's offering, but to compare that to others and assign some type of a letter grade, it just doesn't seem right. So,
and all of this changing that keeps happening, I can't help but think about, how you said you're waiting on last year's numbers, and by the time you finally get those, everything's changed again. Sounds an awful lot like the Browns organization. I'm just throwing that out there. It takes
thanks for bringing
time.
that up, Tina.
I'd like to.
Browns fans love that.
Who can I allude? All I mean is, these people at the state. I'm sure they're supposed to be kind of like people in the FBI, the most intelligent,
sure.
Highly educated about this. I understand technology changes, and it should, and we need to keep up with it, but. If something's not broken, it doesn't need fixed per se. And so, you're more poised to answer that question. But with so much change, I don't know how you get an accurate reflection.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, and I don't know when I look at what's going on across our state. In many ways, it's a microcosm of what is happening in many states across our nation. And there's some groups. I think ALEC is the name of one of those that have education, basically policy language that's being adopted in several different states, including Ohio. And what's interesting to watch is. A lot of these states are starting to revert back to where they were. It's kind of cyclical in a way, and when you're stuck in that cycle and you're the one that's constantly reacting to it, it becomes very, very frustrating. I think what we try to stress here in Wadsworth to our teachers, and students don't really know about this stuff, but the message we try to send to our staff, students, is. Just do your best. Go in there, and if you're a teacher, teach. Do what you were trained through school to do. Do it well, and students work hard. And if we do that, we're going to be okay as a school district. All of this other stuff, while we need to have an active voice down in Columbus so that we just don't sit back and have all of this stuff happen to us. We have people that are doing that, myself and others, lobby groups that work for school districts and other things. I really want our employees to just do their thing, and not worry about all of this other stuff that's happening that really they they can't control. I don't want them losing time worrying about this stuff. You know, if you're at the end of the day, if you're doing good teaching, our students are going to benefit from it, and we're going to be okay as a district, and we'll just take what comes from the state level. We won't take it quietly. You know, we'll make sure that we voice our concerns and voice our opinion with the Department of Education, with our area representative, senator, and hope that in the collaborative effort with many that are raising their voices and concerns, that maybe that'll help effectuate some change. But we're proud of who we are. Our community should be proud of the school district we have, and we'll improve in the areas we need to.